Ernest Thomas was 19 when they found him asleep in the woods. He'd been running for 4 days. When they came for him, they brought a posse. When they killed him, they used over 400 bullets. That was Florida's justice in 1949. And it left 4 names written in blood. Groveland, Florida. It all started 10 days ago on a humid July night in 1949 when Norma Paget, a 17-year-old white woman, burst into a neighbor's home claiming she and her husband, Willie, had been attacked. She was crying. Hysterical. Her story was that 4 black men stopped their car on a back road, pistol-whipped Willie, dragged her into the trees, and raped her. This was the Jim Crow South. And in that world, a white woman's word was all it took. Within hours, the Lake County Sheriff's Department, led by Willis V. McCall, named suspects Ernest Thomas, Samuel Shepard, Walter Irvin, and Charles Greenlee. Charles Greenlee was a child. Just 16 with no history of weapons. No criminal record, his only crime was the black color of his skin. Just one accusation and a town ready to believe it. By sunrise, the mob was already forming. McCall rounded up 3 of the 4. Thomas had vanished into the woods. But the others, Greenlee, Irvin, and Shepard, were arrested and brutally tortured until they signed a confession. Greenlee, a child, was beaten until his mouth bled. His confession said he watched. Irvin and Shepard denied everything. Meanwhile, a mob of nearly 1,000 white men combed the countryside for Thomas. They brought dogs, rifles, torches. Any black man seen on the road was stopped, or worse. Homes were raided. Families terrorized. Then came the killing. On July 26, 1949, 10 days after the alleged crime, they found Thomas asleep under a tree. He had no weapon. No chance. They opened fire. Bullets tore through his body. 400 shots. 1 man. A display of rage so public, photos were printed in newspapers. His corpse, riddled and brutalized, became a trophy. Groveland had sent a message. With Thomas dead, the trial proceeded against the remaining 3. Greenlee, Irvin, and Shepard. They were paraded into a courtroom manacled and bloodied. The local press had already named them guilty. White townsfolk filled the courtroom, some of them even armed. A white supremacist hate group founded in the United States in 1865 after the Civil War, known as Ku Klux Klan, the KKK, marched outside the courthouse. The trial lasted just a few days. The defense was weak. The judge was biased. The all-white jury didn't deliberate long. Irvin and Shepard were sentenced to death. Greenlee was spared the chair due to his age, but received life sentence. Their families grieved, begged. Nobody listened. Their grief hung in the air like smoke, bitter, choking, unseen by a world that turned its face away. But far away, in Harlem, a man named Thurgood Marshall read about the case. He knew what it was, a modern lynching dressed up in legal robes. And he vowed to stop it. Thurgood Marshall was the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP's top attorney. Brilliant, brave, and marked for death by white supremacists. He'd fought, and won, cases across the South. He took the Groveland case personally. He gathered evidence. Witnesses. Photos. Doctors' reports. What he found shocked even him. Norma Paget's story had inconsistencies. Her injuries didn't match her claims. Forensics showed the car she claimed to have been raped in had no blood, no semen, no struggle. But the Florida courts didn't care. Marshall appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, and won. In 1951, they ruled that Irvin and Shepard's rights had been violated and ordered a new trial. Groveland exploded. While awaiting retrial, Irvin and Shepard were moved from Rayford Prison back to Lake County. Sheriff McCall himself volunteered to pick them up. No other escorts, no deputies. Just a racist alone with his victims. And of course, it was a trap. On November 6, 1951, McCall drove the two men down a deserted road. He claimed they attacked him during a bathroom stop. He pulled his revolver and opened fire. Shepard was killed instantly. Irvin was shot in the chest but survived. Barely. He played dead until another deputy arrived. That deputy, despite seeing Irvin breathing, shot him again. Still, Irvin clung to life. Photos of Irvin's bullet wounds were horrifying. But McCall's version of the story stuck: self-defense. No charges were ever filed. Even after surviving 2 gunshot wounds, Walter Irvin was tried again. With Marshall defending him, Irvin testified from a wheelchair. But it didn't matter. Florida wanted blood. He was convicted and sentenced to death. Again. Years later, his sentence was commuted to life by the governor. He was finally released in 1968, but only after 17 years of hell. He died mysteriously the following year. No autopsy was performed. No answers. Charles Greenlee was paroled after more than a decade behind bars. He never stopped telling his story. But few listened. Sheriff McCall remained in power for another 20 years. He was never punished. He was even re-elected. Repeatedly. In 1972, he shot another black prisoner in custody. Again, he claimed self-defense. Again, he walked. The Groveland Four became a footnote. Their names erased from textbooks. Their pain buried beneath Florida's sunshine. But not forever. Time does not heal all wounds. Some fester, until someone dares to reopen them. The year is 2005. A historian named Gilbert King, digging through dusty FBI files and court transcripts, stumbles across the name Thurgood Marshall. He's researching a different case, but what he finds in Lake County is not a story. It's a cover-up. A wound left to rot in silence. He spent years carefully conducting his research and going through the evidences. He tracked down court transcripts, unearthed buried FBI interviews, found the doctor who had been ignored, and the agents who had been silenced. In 2012, he published Devil in the Grove, uncovering in relentless detail the lies that imprisoned 3 boys and got a 4th murdered in the woods. It exposed the scale of the cover-up, and won the Pulitzer Prize. And slowly, the world began to listen. Public pressure followed. Demands for justice grew louder. In 2017, the Florida House and Senate issued a formal apology. In 2019, Governor Ron DeSantis pardoned the Groveland Four. But pardons were not enough. Pardons still imply the possibility of guilt. So in 2021, a circuit court judge formally exonerated all 4 men. The charges, all of them, were vacated. Irvin, Greenlee, Shepard, and Thomas were officially declared innocent. But what does justice mean 72 years too late? This isn't just a story of exoneration. It's a story of how long truth must wait, when it belongs to black men. It took decades, a historian, a book, civil rights lawyers, and a generation who refused to let the dead remain buried under shame. And even in that courtroom in 2021, none of the Groveland Four were alive to hear the words. "You were innocent." Ernest Thomas died in a hail of bullets, asleep under a tree. Samuel Shepard bled to death on a roadside, betrayed by the badge sworn to protect him. Walter Irvin lived just long enough to taste freedom, then died in silence. Charles Greenlee lived the longest. He died in 2012. He never got to see his name cleared. Norma Paget never recanted. Sheriff McCall died in 1994, old, honored by some, unpunished by all. Injustice is not just the absence of fairness, but the very fabric of a broken system. It is a system where lives are discounted by the color of their skin, where truth is sacrificed to the altar of hatred. It is the fear of a black man's name, a name so easily twisted, so easily erased from history, that it becomes as though he never mattered. The Groveland Four were more than victims of a crime. They were casualties of a belief that one race could command power over the fate of another, could control their futures and their voices, even if it meant taking their lives. That is the lie at the heart of this country, the lie that persists, echoing in our history, in our present, and even in the silence of our justice system. Justice is not a favor. It is not a gift given to the deserving. Justice is a right, and yet it is so often denied to those who need it the most. How many more lie buried under the lies we choose to believe? Ernest Thomas, Charles Greenlee, Samuel Shepherd, Walter Irvin. Their names are clear now. But the silence that followed them still echoes. They were sons, brothers, victims of a system built to destroy them. The Groveland Four. Remember their names.